أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسوله محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for joining us once again on our program titled Our Journey or My Journey Through Islam. Today's guest is Salahuddin Yahya, who I'm sure you can all remember from the previous episode when we talked about his life prior to Islam, and we reached a certain point which we will try to continue today. So assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum salam.
So in our journey, in our story, we reached the point where you received a letter telling you that you have been accepted or you've been called towards God to be in becoming a priest.
Indeed, yeah. And as I think I mentioned in the last episode, that's quite a momentous moment for any young man to believe that they can now be serving their creator, their God, full-time as an occupation, as a vocation. So I was immensely pleased with that. And of course I was able then effectively to prepare for priesthood, which for me meant leaving Yorkshire, getting on a train with my few belongings and go all the way down to Chichester, which is where I stayed for 4 years in order to train to be a priest. And it was people like myself. It was young, old, middle-aged, some not so middle-aged. And together there, residentially, we trained, went to church, studied. You see, it was both, really. Not only was I reading the Quran in its original language, but at the same time, I was doing a master's degree in Christian theology, in fact, Orthodox theology, because I thought that's where my future lay. And so I thought the Arabic would be useful. I thought the master's degree in Christianity, in Orthodox Christianity, would be useful. But perversely, ironically, a master's degree is very much in depth. It's not a simple degree. And I was studying the Trinity. Not only was I studying the Trinity, but I was studying the fact of the deification, if you like, of God in Jesus Christ, the incarnation. And I was studying it in such depth that the very degree that was supposed to be preparing me for Christian priesthood within the Orthodox Church was turning me into a Muslim. SubhanAllah. Because when you study a master's degree and you're looking at the areas of the Trinity, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, the Holy Trinity, you're looking at the Church Fathers, what we might call the scholars, the Church Fathers, the patricians. You're going through all of their works one by one. They're thick books. You're looking at the ways in which these philosophers, these theologians, these Church Fathers borrowed from the pagan Greek. And
how old were you at this point?
Well, I was quite young. At the time, I was 19 when I went into the seminary, the theological college, and I was ordained at 23. And at that time, it was in the days when people were struggling to find people to become priests, particularly young men. They weren't interested. So I was the youngest, effectively, in the college, and also I think the year I was ordained, and for many years, I was the youngest priest in the Church of England by quite a margin. And they were interesting days, which I enjoyed. But it was also quite an eye-opener because I was fairly naive, as most people are, before they become priests. I was just an ordinary person in the congregation, so to speak. But when I went down on the train to Chichester to train to be a priest, I noticed that they weren't noticeably any holier than I was. Or indeed, in some cases, they seemed less holy.
You must have had some expectation before you went, and obviously it didn't meet your expectations.
Indeed. And so I thought, well, I'm training to be a priest, so I need to up my game in the holiness stakes. So I went there full of piety and discipline and expectation and hope of living an extremely virtuous life, which was going to become more virtuous. But when I got there, I found that the students who were in year 2, year 3 and year 4 weren't any noticeably more holy than I was, and in many cases were a lot less holy. And after my first term, we had a very short term called the Michaelmas term. It was only about 4 weeks long. By the end of this, I invited somebody for coffee in my room. And they brought to my attention that I was being rather pompous and rather religious and rather over-pious in the way in which I behaved.
Can you be over-pious, do you think?
I'm not quite sure. Clearly not in the views of some of my contemporaries. And so that was a disconnect in my mind between what I felt one was preaching and how one was actually behaving in real life. And in those days, we had training in order to hear people's confessions. Yeah. Now, I know we don't have this in Islam as such, but effectively that is when you go to a priest in order to unburden oneself and admit your sins before this priest in order to obtain forgiveness. The idea being that if you're going to hear other people's confessions, you then must have your confession listened to. And so I was sent in the direction of the Close, which is a group of houses surrounding Chichester Cathedral, wherein a very holy and venerable and elderly gentleman resided. And he was a wonderful canon of the church, a priest of the church. And I was sent to him for my preparation for confession. And I went in to see him, and we talked about my several sins and my attitude towards confession. And I'll never forget, there was one point in the conversation where I tried to exonerate myself, as most sinners do. And I'd heard this in the college, said quite a lot. And so I repeated it to him. And I said, "But Father," I said, "I'm only human." And he said to me, "Yes, I know, John, but God is calling us to be the best human being we can be, not the worst."
Very good.
Very holy fellow.
That ties in with the message of Islam as well, that we should try to do the best that we can, or the best deed. Allah looks at the quality of our deed rather than the quantity of our deeds.
Indeed. And that for me was a very important lesson, that God wanted me to be the best human being I could be, not the worst.
Yeah.
So this excuse no longer held sway for me. So I finished my time at college, did my studies, and then eventually ended up in London, where I was a curate. A curate is basically assistant priest. And I spent about 3 to 4 years in London with a more senior priest. And his job is to guide me and show me the ropes, as it were. And again, I was very acutely aware of my age. I was exceptionally young. And I can remember doing my first funeral. And I was dressed not dissimilarly to what I'm wearing now. Yeah. And the priest couldn't do the funeral. And he said, "Would you do it, Father John?" I said, "Yeah, no problem, I'll do it." And I was extremely nervous. I was a very young man, and I was doing a funeral, which, as you know, is a very serious thing. And I can remember walking through the streets of London behind this funeral cortege, where was a limousine with a body in the back. And the old ladies were leaning on the doors in the streets as we went past and says, "Oh, look, it looks like Father Paul can't make it. He sent his son instead." And so I was very aware that I was very young, and I had a lot to learn. I was an impressionable young priest. But I enjoyed my time at college. I enjoyed my time as a curate. And after a short while as a curate, you're then able to go on to either have your own parish, your own church, or you can do other things. And I chose to do other things, and I went in the direction of chaplaincy. Okay. And so I ended up, after an interview, serving with the Royal Air Force for 4 years. And following the Royal Air Force, I then transferred my commission into the British Army.
Okay, so you were chaplain for the British Army. Yeah. Where did that take you?
Basically, it took me all over the world. I served all over England and out of the country as well. More notably, Northern Ireland, where I spent a lot of time. I was involved with the terrorist, counter-terrorist efforts in Northern Ireland, in the province. But more significantly, perhaps for Islam, in that I was also part of the first Gulf War. Okay. And that was an experience that I shall never forget. I was in Germany at the time. I was based in a place called Fallingbostel. And suddenly I had a phone call that this war was imminent. I think it might have been top secret at that point. But I was called to a meeting where we sat round this huge big table. And suddenly the senior chaplain says, "Look, I've got to tell you guys, we're off to the desert, basically."
And that was it? That was the time that you were told, right, we're going to...
We're going.
Did you know that there was a war happening at the time?
Yeah, they said we were in preparations for a war. And even at that point, there were chaplains around that table who refused to go.
Oh, right, okay.
But not on moral grounds, it was they were scared.
Oh, right, okay.
Because when you joined the army in those days, you didn't expect to be in any kind of war. You joined for the travel, or you joined for the money, or you joined for the sport. There were no wars anymore. Wars had been finished with.
You're not prepared for that kind of...
You didn't expect,
role.
you just wanted, you know, to serve in the British Army. You didn't expect to go and have to fight a war. I was slightly more phlegmatic about the war. I just decided, well, you know, this is what I've signed up for. I must go.
Yeah.
So within a very short time, with no training for the desert as such, I found myself in the desert. In Al-Jabal, which I probably haven't pronounced correctly.
Very good pronunciation.
Which is in Saudi Arabia. And we were left there for about a month to acclimatise because the heat in Saudi was quite incredible. And
yeah, with you being in Saudi, were you ever exposed to Islam whilst you were there, or were you in kind of certain areas where Islam wasn't really seen or heard?
Well, I'm obviously within a British environment, so of course Islam is never mentioned. But occasionally, when I got out of the camp and I talked to local Saudis, I was able to talk to Muslims. And this is where it became very interesting, because we talked about how they differed from our beliefs and how I differed from their beliefs, and especially around the crucifixion of Jesus, etc., and the place of the Quran and the place of the Bible. This was fascinating to me. And I had R&R. I was dragged out of the desert for 2 or 3 days to go down to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. I stayed in a beautiful hotel, the Marriott. I'll never forget it. And I will never forget the perfumed air as I walked in.
Yeah, you tend to find that in a lot of places in Saudi Arabia.
There was a wonderful scent in the air. And I came in my soldier's outfit, shaking the dust like Lawrence of Arabia as I walked into this very posh hotel. And I got talking to some of the Saudi Arabian men. They weren't dressed in soldiers' uniforms like me. They had the dish dash, the Saudi style. They had the, now let me get this right, is it masbaha?
Masbaha, yeah.
Masbaha, the prayer beads.
Yeah.
They had the head scarf. And when I looked at them, I couldn't believe how clean they were, because the dish dash would be white and there wouldn't be a crease in it or a mark on it. Their beards were perfectly manicured and I looked a mess.
So you noticed the cleanliness from there?
I noticed the cleanliness straight away. The cleanliness, the hygiene, the lovely smell. And this was attractive, even though this isn't heavy theology or heavy Islam. But it's an impression, and impressions are important.
Of course.
And it made an impression on me. The second thing I noticed, of course, was when I was in the desert, I would often be left on my own as a priest to go and visit the different units.
Okay.
And as such, I would find that you would see Bedouin and Arabs and others by the side of the road performing their salah.
So maybe that's where you were first, kind of the first time you were exposed properly to the people maybe praying. We're going to have to cut you off there, but inshallah we'll come back and we'll continue our journey with Brother Salahuddin Yahya. Thank you very much, and we'll hopefully see you after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome back to the second part of today's program with Brother Salahuddin Yahya. So, very interesting story, very exciting for me following your journey. You are now amongst Bedouins, you are amongst Arabs, and you've noticed a few of them kneeling down in prostration in the sand, I presume?
Absolutely.
Praying. Did this spark some sort of questions in your mind, or any sort of attraction at this point?
Well, it did, because I've mentioned the clothes
Yeah.
and the hygiene, but that's very much on the surface. What you're seeing now is the piety of the Muslim. And that, of course, spoke to me as somebody who was trying to serve God and trying to achieve truth in my life. To see people not just speaking Islam and arguing about the crucifixion or whether it happened or whether it didn't happen. There is no arguing when it comes to salah.
No.
You're performing the salah. You are praying to Allah, your creator. In that sense, it speaks more, I think. Well, it certainly did in that circumstance to me.
Actions speak louder than words.
So from there, I kind of dismissed it because the war got in the way.
I can imagine, yeah.
And so I saw my time out in the war, returned to the UK. And when I came back to the UK, I was based in a place called Tidworth in Wiltshire. And being a single man, I had a habit of eating out. Now, I used to go to this restaurant. Well, it was more a takeaway than a restaurant, but a restaurant sounds more glamorous. And the fellow that ran it transpired that he was a Muslim. Now, that didn't bother me. Now, I would walk in there and I would order my food. You always have to wait for your food. And I would get into conversations with him. He could see from the way I was dressed that I was a priest. I had no idea that he was a Muslim, but I became aware he was through our conversations, and he would talk to me about Islam. And I remember on one occasion, he must have been waiting for me, because before my doner kebab arrived, he went out the back and arrived back with a holy Quran.
Right.
He says, I have something for you. And he disappeared and came back. I have something for you. And he gave it, and I was very, very happy to receive this gift. A beautiful Quran, a hardbound Quran, which I took home. I delved into it, but I couldn't quite get into it, because I looked at it and I thought, well, this is just the Bible, really. It's just a watered-down version of the Bible. The Bible is much more in detail, these stories, than the Quran, so what is the point of reading the Quran? So it just went back straight on the shelf. That if I am to have any kind of future within this church, rather than the Church of England, learning Arabic might be useful.
Yeah.
And I had been asked to be ordained into that church also. So I thought Arabic being a good idea, why not try and learn it? When I got home and I started learning Arabic on my own, with a little bit of help from an Arabic-speaking Christian at the church, the only book I had in the house was the Quran.
Is that the gift that was given to you?
And it was
by
exactly the same book. Which is an interesting thing, because if you think that man had no idea,
of course,
that the very book that he gave me in Wiltshire, you know, 20 years beforehand, I would be reaching for 20 years later.
Yeah.
And that book, that very book, would introduce me to Islam.
SubhanAllah.
MashaAllah. So from there, learning Arabic, from reading the Quran, meeting at this point more Muslims, and having conversations with them, being impressed by the quality of their prayer life, their iman, I started to think very seriously about Islam as a belief for myself. I hadn't made a decision. I just thought about it as a potential faith.
You ignited the flame in a way.
It ignited the flame that had been there for some time. Now, at this time, I'd also agreed to go to Jerusalem as part of my master's course. I'm doing a master's in Orthodox theology.
So part of your course was to travel to Jerusalem?
It wasn't obligatory.
Okay.
I was asked if I wanted to. Nobody was forced to go. And I didn't want to go initially. I thought, why go? Why go there? But then I thought, why not? You know, this is an experience. You're going with other people. You only live once. Let's go. But while all this was going on, I'd agreed to go on the Jerusalem trip before I had decided to embrace Islam. No decision had been made. No decision whatsoever. Because I was turning my back on a lot. I'd been offered ordination. You know, I'd been a priest in the Church of God. You know, I was doing a master's degree in Christian theology. Being a Muslim was not part of the plan. So the way I left it was with Allah. I'd already started performing wudu and salah in my own way.
But when you got to Jerusalem?
When I got to Jerusalem, I decided that that would be the point when I would know whether I was to continue as a Christian or whether I would embrace Islam.
Okay, and what was it that kind of, you got to the door, you maybe knocked on the door, what was it that made you open that door and enter and embrace Islam?
To be honest, I was on automatic pilot. I arrived by EasyJet and I was on automatic pilot ever since. I arrived in Jerusalem one night. By the morning, I performed wudu. I had my breakfast, I got on a coach, I went to the old city in Jerusalem, I saw 2 Israeli guard. I was an automatic pilot. I said to the Israeli guard, who looked at me disdainfully, I said, could you tell me where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is? They looked at me and said, you Muslim? And for the first time ever in my life, I said, yeah, I'm a Muslim. And they went, oh, you go down there and it's on the left, and then as you go up these steps. I said, thank you very much. They gave me another bad look and off I went. Now when I got to where they told me to go, there were some ascending steps and a big gate going through onto the Temple Mount. Now as I stood at the bottom of these steps, there were swathes of people coming the other way. English, Americans, Germans, tourists, you name it, all coming and say, they won't let us in, they won't let us in, they won't let us in, you're not allowed up there, you can't go in there. And I kept on walking and walking and walking, step by step by step.
Nobody stopped you at that point?
Israeli guards stood there with their guns. I keep walking, keep walking, keep walking. I saw the people coming back, I heard what they were saying, and I just made one prayer to Allah. And I couldn't remember much Arabic, but I remember the Sirat al-Mustaqim.
Sirat al-Mustaqim, the straight path.
I said, Allah, if this is, you said what made me change from Christian? I made that one prayer and I said, if those gates open to me, then you have made the decision for me.
Subhanallah.
I said, make straight that path. And I tell you, with no word of a lie, I walked through the Israeli guard as if I was invisible, like an angel.
Subhanallah.
Within seconds, I was stood on the Temple Mount with the Golden Dome and Al-Aqsa in the background. And I made straight for it. I did wudu again.
Yeah.
In the House of Ablutions, I went through the portico, I put my shoes in the pigeonhole, I walked into the carpeted area. I found two young students I started talking to in broken English. As soon as an imam was free, one of the young students grabbed my hand and said, "Come with me." I said, "Okay." I'd explained to them that I would like to have given my shahada. They took hold of my hand. We had to step over everybody. Al-Aqsa is a big place with many thousands of worshippers. They took me right to the front, right to the mihrab in Al-Aqsa, where the imam was. He explained in Arabic, here is a man who's come on an aeroplane all the way from England, and he would like to give his shahada today.
Subhanallah. So you took your shahada in Masjid Al-Aqsa, right in the front of the mihrab.
Right in the mihrab.
Subhanallah. I mean, for you to be there, take your shahada, and this journey that you took, asking Allah for guidance towards Qira'at al-Mustaqim, for myself is an inspiration, and I hope it's an inspiration for those who have been listening as well. Just very quickly, before we end the show, what has your life been like? Just summarize it very quickly if you can, after accepting the shahada, coming back.
I can say one word: peace.
Peace and aman.
Once you start performing the salah, once you start living a life which pleases Allah, you have a peace that I never knew as a Christian, that I've only ever known as a Muslim. There is a peace in your heart which is different than any peace that I've experienced before, which is temporary. The peace that I received that day in the Mihrab Al-Aqsa has never left me to this day, mashallah.
And we pray it will never leave you and it will be with you for the rest of your days. It's been an absolute pleasure just going through this journey with you. I can understand that there must have been difficulties and there must have been hardships, especially with regards to changing maybe your habits or changing the way in which you pray or the way in which you think. But when you have that peace in your heart, I think it will give you inspiration and give inspiration to those who are watching, and give you kind of a boost. And we hope that we will, inshallah, follow this journey in days to come, and we hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides us all towards that Sirat al-Mustaqim. I thank you for listening, I thank you for watching, I thank you for joining us on this journey as usual, and we hope pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we will have many other opportunities to speak to brothers like Salahuddin Yahya. And just before we finish, Salahuddin is the name given to yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about why you chose Salahuddin, if it's not already obvious?
I think for me it was, and it wasn't obvious at the time. I didn't go with the intention of that name. It was sometime after I had been. It was the significance of Jerusalem for me. That I could go in many ways as a Christian, and come back as a Muslim. In many ways, it was very similar in the times of Salahuddin, who went when it was a Christian city, but he was able to capture it for Islam. And I had been captured in my heart for Allah. And so for me, I saw the obvious parallels in my journey with Salahuddin and his exploits within the holy city of Jerusalem.
So that's where Salahuddin came from.
Indeed.
Thank you very much, Salahuddin. Thank you very much, everybody who's watching. We'll have to end the show there. Thank you for watching. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.